Joining us now, former attorney for Hunter Biden, Chris Clark. Chris, it's really good to see you again. Thank you for being with us. Last time we talked, you were about to get a plea deal that ultimately fell apart. Since then, a lot has happened. You no longer work with Hunter Biden, but he's now pleaded guilty to gun charges and to tax evasion. Why do you think the president went back on his promise not to pardon his son?
Well, I think it's actually a different perspective that you're right. We had a plea deal and Mr. Weiss went back on the deal we had. It was a bit tragic. I think it put everybody through all kinds of trauma that no one needed. And we all went through the lawful process, and that unfair result came about, and the president had to make things right. So you and I spoke, and we had a deal. And unfortunately, Mr. Weiss reneged on it. I was shocked. I think a lot of people were shocked by it. And that's why executive clemency exists, because when people do things for reasons that are not, I don't want to say right, but maybe motivated by different things, you need a chance to override them.
But even
a lot of people. I'm sorry, Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Even after the plea deal fell apart, President Biden promised on the campaign trail multiple times that he wasn't going to do this, implying that it would set a bad precedent for him to pardon his own family members. So you call it a corrupted process. You said it was politically compromised. So why, even after the plea deal fell apart and after he promised not to do the pardon, why would he come out at the last minute and say, no, you know what, I've changed my mind. I am going to pardon my son. And I'm going to do it from 2014 on for an 11-year span, not just pardoning him for these two crimes, but for anything that he may have done between 2011 and the present day.
I don't mean to be lawyerly, but I didn't say a corrupted process. I said a problematic process. But,
okay, fine.
It's the same extent that the plea deal that we had covered, because the point was you need to end these things. You can't Hunter Biden was never a political actor. He was a man who was a troubled man who turned his life around. I thought, actually, I really did think that Mr. Weiss, before certain people got a hold of him, understood that and appreciated that. And we came to an agreement, not just as lawyers and gentlemen, but in a contract that all of those issues were resolved. And he reneged on that. He then took him to trial twice for Katie, nobody in Delaware has ever been prosecuted for possessing a gun as a drug user, except for Hunter Biden and one other guy. And that other guy, David Weiss, dismissed the case against. These are the kinds of cases that shouldn't be brought. And regrettably, the process didn't work, and the president had to fix it. That's what executive clemency is about. And I don't think he wanted to, and I don't think we wanted him to have to. We fought for 5-6 years to get a resolution that made sense, that people agreed to, and they backed out of it at the last minute. I mean, I don't know. Everyone will draw their own conclusions. I feel like Congress put a lot of pressure on it. But this isn't like someone breaking a promise. This is someone who's using a process we have to try to bring fairness and resolve things. Does anybody really care at this point in the United States that Hunter Biden had a gun for 24 hours? Does anybody care? I'm sure there's a bunch of people that will raise their hand on Truth Social, but they don't really.
Let me ask you about something you just said, which is that David Weiss reneged, went back on the deal after somebody got a hold of him. Someone got a hold of him. You think that was Congress? Who do you think got a hold of him? What do you think changed?
I mean, again, and I won't check the transcript on this one. I'm not sure if it's someone, but Yeah, Congress went crazy on the guy. I mean, we had 4 or 5 briefs submitted by members of Congress about a plea deal. They weren't parties. Congress isn't a party to a plea deal in a criminal proceeding in federal court. What possible interest did they have in, again, this? Hunter Biden has struggled and he's successfully overcome his struggles. And what possible interest do they have in like him getting slammed to the wall? Political partisanship. That was kind of it. And so, yeah, I feel like Mr. Weiss gave into that. I don't think I was very quiet about it at the time. I think the filed affidavit in court about his discussions with me. And it was deeply, deeply disappointing that that's the way it went down.
Yeah, I remember you telling me on the air that, the statement that from David Weiss was funny because it said the investigation is ongoing. And I asked you about that, and you said that it was your understanding that the investigation was not ongoing and that you would not make this deal with the assumption that anything else was later to come. Let me ask you about the 11-year span again, because President Biden was very specific not to pardon him for just these 2 crimes. Does that tell you that he's worried that the Republicans under Donald Trump might try to go after Hunter Biden in some other way after this, or if the president had only pardoned him for specifically for the gun charge or gun conviction and the tax evasion?
I mean, what it tells me is that this should be brought to an end. I'm going to use the term nonsense. I mean, this is Hunter struggled. Hunter's been through a lot of stuff in his life. You cannot like him, you can like him, but he doesn't need to be a political whipping boy for anybody anymore, right? His dad's not going to be president anymore. And I think very thoughtful people have realized that we have to stop this. I was going to use a word that I'm not going to use, stuff, where we're taking out aggression on people who really don't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. And so I think people thought in a forward-thinking way, let's make sure this ends it. And it should be ended. It really should be.
One of the criticisms that's out there about this pardon is not that he did it, but it's the way in which he did it. Instead of coming out and saying, Hunter Biden is my son, I already lost one son to cancer, I don't want to lose another. I can't let him, go to prison. Whatever. He didn't come out and say that. I'm a father. I'm not going to let it happen. I have this authority. I'm not going to let it happen. Instead, what he did was he kind of went after the process. And he, in some ways, went after parts of the DOJ, helping to eat into the confidence for an agency that's already suffering a great deal in the public's perception of it. Was it a good idea? Would you have gone after the Department of Justice the way that President Biden did in issuing this pardon for his son?
I'm going to answer that 2 ways. One is there are people who have been screeching and screaming about the weaponization of the DOJ for the last 8 or 6 years. I was Hunter Biden's lawyer for 5 or 6 years, and it's hard for me to think of a more weaponized thing than we dealt with for him, A. And B, I will say, as a person who was deeply involved in this process, that the process that Hunter Biden went through at the DOJ was deeply unfair. And I was a former official of the DOJ. I deeply respect the DOJ. It has an incredibly important role to play in our world, and its integrity is incredibly important. But again, when you have a deal with the DOJ, people in my world believe they live by it, and they didn't. And that undermines it just as much as when it's weaponized. The DOJ's word has to be just as solid as, Swiss gold. And when it's not, It's problematic and you have to fix it. So I don't think that's why the president did what he did. I don't think it's tragic what the Biden family's been through over the years. Beau Biden's demise is tragic, but this wasn't a good process. It just wasn't. I mean, I was there the whole way, and it wasn't a good process. And now it's been corrected.
Have you spoken to Hunter
Not today.
in the past 24 hours?
I have not. No, I'll be today.